Daisy.
And I'm Terri.
And this is the Monday Mindset Podcast,
where we share things of interest to us and hopefully to you.
So let's get started with episode number 199.
Woohoo!
And this week it is Terri's turn to share something. Terri, what do you have?
Well, Daisy, you had reminded me this last time when we were recording that a while back I had mentioned a topic of neurobics in an episode, and that I promised that at some point maybe I would come back and talk more detail about that. So I wanted to do that today. And it kind of carries on from last week's episode about exercise and the effects on the brain. And it also goes back to an episode that you shared very early on about some activities that can help with our brain. So I just want to talk about this topic of neurobics. And for those listeners who haven't yet read the description, I'm just going to spell it. So it is Neurobics. By listening to that, you can probably tell it's a combination of two words, neuron and aerobics. And most of us know what aerobics are when we talk about physical exercise. So what the heck are these neurobics? Basically, neurobics are exercises that kind of stretch the brain. They increase the oxygen and they give our brain neurons an opportunity to grow because of the novel activities, situations, or events that we're processing at that moment. So I actually didn't listen to a podcast episode to explain this. I just looked up some articles and tried to kind of piece some information together. So one article talked about the idea that once we stretch our brain, it doesn't really return to the old form. And research says that basically by making our brains sweat, air quotes there, by doing this exercise, that by having it exposed to these unfamiliar exercises, that this can actually help our ability to learn, improve our memory, and even increase our problem-solving abilities. Now, many of us involved in this, many listeners, you and I, we're not getting younger every year. We age a little bit each year. And of course, those are some things that start to be affected as we're aging. And so I think this is really an important topic to think about as we age. Doesn't have to be anything huge that we do, but there are some really important things that we could be doing to help our brains. So the neurobic exercise concept was actually first kind of written about and discussed by two researchers, Katz and Rubin. And they basically describe it that it's a form of brain exercise that it's designed to help keep the brain healthy and active. And they just said that it's different than other types of brain exercises, but I did not dig into what are those other type of brain exercises they're talking about. But I guess even in the medical field, in hospital settings, in retirement settings, things like that, they have for years been trying to do brain activities. But it might be things like doing some art, doing a puzzle, just kind of things to keep the brain active. And so what they've found is that there's really some more specific things we should be looking at with those activities. Neurobics actually involves non-routine or unexpected experiences using various combinations of the 5 physical and emotional senses. So I'm going way back, Daisy. Early on, you shared an example of standing on one foot while brushing your teeth, or switching the toothbrush into your non-dominant hand. These actually are examples of neurobics. So bravo to you. You were onto something very early on with this. So what do they do? Basically, neurobic exercises help improve the nerve impulses and the linkages between the parts of the brain and the brain data that's being conveyed. So they help with the synapses as well as the neural growth. They help stimulate neurons to produce neurotrophins that have chemical effects on nerve cell growth, improve nerve fiber branch, and reduce nerve cell degeneration. So of course, as we're looking ahead for some of us wanting maybe to not experience dementia or beyond that into Alzheimer's, these exercises may be really useful in helping neuron growth and help prevent or slow nerve cell degeneration. As a result, these neurobic exercises help stimulate other parts of the brain, help prevent the decline of memory, and they also maintain a level of memory performance. So obviously, again, thinking of dementia and Alzheimer's, these can be really important things. I'm going to go into some more details about what they do and everything, but just want to kind of highlight as people are listening, what are they? What are some examples of neurobic activities that we could be doing? So using your non-dominant hand, writing with your non-dominant hand, drawing with your non-dominant hand, doing things, like if I normally hold my coffee cup in this hand, maybe today I'm going to put it over here on this side of my laptop and I'm going to use this hand all day when I'm doing that. So just switching something as simple as that can be helpful for our brain.
Maybe not mess around with liquids around your laptop.
Okay, good point. Good point.
Just in case.
Another example, like walk backwards for a day. Lots of, things that your brain has to do to make that experience. Learn to play a new game. Learn a new activity. Hello, back to the beginning skiing. Solve a crossword puzzle or a Sudoku puzzle each day. Don't talk for a day or two. Make your brain have to process everything without talking and figure out new ways of communicating and, just stretching the situational thing. Drive a different route than your usual routine. If you always go a certain way, drive a different route. So again, they don't have to be complicated things. And actually, all of the examples I read about are actually very easy things to do technically. They don't involve having to buy equipment. Now, of course, there are apps that will promote to you some brain activities, some neurobic activities that you can do, which is great. But I just want to be really clear that these are things that you can do on your own without having to purchase an app or purchase any kind of equipment or anything. So based on our conversation in the last episode, I was probably not surprised, but was kind of pleased that the topic came up in some of these articles I was reading, that neurobic exercise can actually increase the BDNF levels in our brains, and that is brain-derived neurotropic factor. And I, of course, always go to, okay, well, what does that mean? Why is that important? So BDNF plays an important role in neuronal survival and growth. So again, if we want our brain neurons to be healthy and grow, thrive, BDNF is really important. It also serves as a neurotransmitter modulator, so helping modulate what messages get passed between synapses. And it also is active in the neuronal plasticity. So this whole concept of neuroplasticity that we've been learning about over these past few years, BDNF is really important in that. And that is also essential for learning and memory. Again, two things most of us want to kind of preserve as we age. So doing new things or having unexpected experiences help stimulate the production of neurotrophins, which chemically affect the growth of nerve cells, nerve fiber branches, and also, again, reduce the degeneration of nerve cells. And, as we touched on last week, I think, increase the blood flow to the brain, which is important. Blood flow to the brain brings in new oxygen, which is really important for growth and activity. And so just to kind of clarify, how is this different than other activities that we do? Trying new things, new experiences, and again, some of them are emotional, not just, sight, sound, or physical manipulation, but even going outside and watching a sunrise. If that brings up emotions for you, that is part of the nootropic realm. What this can help you do is strengthen your nerve cell stimulation. Whereas our routine activities, the routine activities that we do all of the time, actually use the same brain pathways, which eventually leads to brain deadening. those eventually kind of wear out and deteriorate. So the new is what's so important about this, helping with stimulation rather than deadening. I mentioned earlier that some of the research shows crossing over between different types of activities or activities that would activate your sense of taste and also sound, or, crossing over two different parts, that this can be helpful. And again, the emotional one is important because our processing of emotions happens in the limbic system, which is also the part of our brain that kind of manages laying down memories. And so if we want to have better memory and be able to hold on to things, we want to stimulate that part of the brain. The articles that I read, one of them involved kind of reporting a lot of studies. And the too long, don't read summary of that is all of those studies cited in this article talked about some benefit they were primarily looking at individuals who were aging and who had already experienced some minor cognitive impairment, which is kind of the precursor, as you can imagine, to dementia and Alzheimer's. So looking at people who are already starting to show some signs, so started using these neurotropic exercises, and all of the studies cited, of course, in this article did show significant improvement. Not just, it's kind of helpful, but significant improvements. In one study, participants who were in the neurobic exercise intervention group versus the control group, they showed significant improvement in cognitive function and also serum levels of BDNF 6 months after completing the intervention. So that also shows that it can have lasting effect. It's not just, it'll work today, but it can have long-term improvements in the brain.
How long did they do it for?
I didn't go through each study. This was a research study. So they were talking about previous research studies that all also supported the same findings that they had.
Yeah, I was just wondering like that, that 6 months lasted 6 months after doing it for... do you have to do it for a year before you get that? You see what I'm saying?
Didn't find that. But interestingly, along that line, they test all kinds of things during this. And one thing they test is an objective memory score. And in the studies, many of the studies, the people did the activities for a while, and then they didn't, and they kept testing. And there was a washout period, is what they call it, where they aren't doing the activity anymore. And results in one study did show a slight decrease in the objective memory score during that washout period when they didn't continue the activities to stimulate their brain. So, of course, one of the implications of this study is promoting continuous activity. In these studies, they're all looking at older people, but I believe this for any of us. Continuous activities to help stimulate the brain should be conducted rather than do it for a short period of time and then just hope it lasts forever. Evidence showed that if the brain is being used continuously and appropriately stimulated, the brain will improve even with advanced age. So that old thing of, I'm just getting old, that's just what happens, that doesn't have to be what happens. And I think about so many of the environments that people tend to be in and situations people tend to be in as they age. There's less and less stimulation, less and less opportunity. So I think this is an important thing to hold on to for all of us, that as some of our environmental exposure may become more limited as we age, we can keep doing neurobic activities. We can keep switching our hand when we're brushing our teeth or standing on one foot or, doing all these other things. And then just a repeat of something I've already said, but just they emphasize this again, that combining 2 or more senses in these activities can promote the operation of memory-related regions of the brain, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the temporal, the occipital, the limbic system. And as a result of that, the function of the neural network, which is responsible for both short-term and long-term memory, is enhanced. And some of these studies they did with people who were a little earlier on in dementia, and they still found improvement. So I really want to encourage everyone listening to think about incorporating some of these things in their life now, rather than waiting until what they call MCI, the mild cognitive impairment, or dementia or Alzheimer's has really set in. Much harder time getting new neural growth at that point. So really trying to work on these things now. So I'm in my 50s, some listeners are in their 40s, 60s, 70s. Go ahead and start doing these things now to help stave off that kind of natural decline that can happen if we're not stimulating the brain in these ways.
Is it important to keep finding new stuff? And you were saying about this difference between same old routine, and it's like you're just over-wearing the track and it starts wearing out. And the way to start creating fresh new tracks is to start doing new things. But I say, obviously, there's a limit. I mean, there's probably never a limit to finding new things. But do you have to keep doing new things, or can you sort of rotate through different things? Like, so I'm going to brush my teeth with my left hand for this week and then switch back. Can you sort of alternate to make it novel, or cycle through a few things? Like you were saying, taking a different route when you're driving somewhere where there are only so many different things you can do. So, if you alternate 2 or 3 different routes, if you cycle through those, is that going to have the same effect as having something new because you're changing it often? Or does it say, hold on, we've got these,
we've done this before,
new well-worn paths? I wonder, how much can we manipulate that?
Yeah, unfortunately, Daisy, I'm sure if I continued for more days, I would find a lot more information about neurobics. I didn't see anything that really discussed that. I guess from just in my own way of thinking about it, I do think there will be some new things as you switch back and forth, but the amount of newness will obviously decline as, switching back and forth between hands every few days. It's not a brand new activity. It's not a novel experience. But it is different than what your brain has started to settle into, so I'm sure it can still be helpful. But I think that would be an example where we might have a harder time continually finding novel things like that, but reading about something new, learning about something new, exposing yourself to a new experience. And in one of the articles, it was actually targeted toward college students and helping them learn to do these things now. And so a lot of theirs were social things, like go to an event that is of a cultural background different than yours, be exposed to these new things. And they talked about then some of the other effects of this is you're going to learn to be more open. You could learn to be more understanding of differences and things. So obviously you could tell part of their purpose in having this kind of course designed for their students. But I think for general situations, I don't think we're going to keep getting the same impact if we just keep switching back and forth in those. But you want to continue adding new things, new morning routines. And I know we talk about morning routine being really important, but just the order of things even can change it. They talk about journaling can even be a neurobic activity because you're thinking new thoughts and writing them down and all of these things. So to me, the most important thing is not, and as I said, I didn't research what they meant by kind of old traditional brain training, but I think a lot of brain training is just exposure. And although I think that can be really helpful, this is a little bit more than just exposure. It's like having to engage with something new, experience and process something new that really helps make the difference here.
Yeah, and it makes me think about when you were talking about this crossing over and using more than one sense. And I think we've spoken about this with memory, haven't we? That's one of the tricks. One of the memory tricks is trying to associate more than one will help bed that memory in better. And it's one of the books on my list that I keep meaning to and keep forgetting to, and did a teaser, I think, ages ago about Gretchen Rubin's not so new book anymore, but the 5 senses. And it just made me think when you were saying about doing something different, just, going outdoors. And it made me think, as I always do, about my dog walks, but mentioned before about breaking. We had a very fixed routine, my dogs and I, just really pretty much going to the same park, and we go to different places now. Although funnily enough, I was thinking just this morning that we've got into a new routine with somewhere else, but at least the place we go to is a lot more variable. But then it suddenly got me thinking when you were talking about this, trying to come up with new things all the time, but how much you could actually milk out of an experience like that. And that's when Gretchen Rubin popped into my head. And I think she talks about doing a sort of senses exercise where you focus on one sense. But you could, for example, out on a dog walk. And of course, it's always going to be slightly different because the weather's slightly different. The seasons are changing, the different things are growing. So you could focus on different things at once. Okay, so on this dog walk, I'm going to really focus on, what are the smells, especially coming up this time of year, here in the UK anyway, spring, there are going to be, any time of year, there'd be different smells, but they're more likely to be more smells with, new different flowers coming up. Only today, as I was walking through the woods, and there were some lovely wood anemones, and so I noticed those. So really trying to tap into your senses, especially when you're outside, and giving your brain a bit of a workout there, going through that. Okay, well, what new things can I see? Instead of just trudging round on your dog walk and not really thinking too much. Okay, I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to do a bit of an I spy, or I hear, or I smell, I feel. How does it feel different today? All these different things, and trying to milk as much novel stuff as you can out of some of these fairly routine experience. So you should be ticking that new box.
That's right.
Even though it's quite a routine activity.
Paying attention to different aspects of it, exactly, rather than going through that dog walk. It's like, okay, I do this every day, and just kind of zoning out. Stay present and focus on some new stimuli. Like you said, that's different. It's different this week. There are different dogs here. There are different people. There are different sounds. The lighting is different. Like, all of these things can be part of that. So I think that's a great example. Even when you do a routine that maybe doesn't feel like there are a lot of ways you can change it, you can change it by paying attention to different aspects.
Yeah, and that when you were talking about walking backwards sometimes, I forget the guest now. I can picture him, but I can't remember his name. A guest I had on Keto Woman years ago, and he talked about the importance of that, of when you go out for a walk, is turning around, walking backwards, walking sideways, doing side to sides, doing these different things as being good for you physically, but again, it's going to give your brain a workout. Daryl Edwards comes to mind, and another guest I had, a British guy who's all into exercise with play. So he has all sorts of different, he has like these animal exercises, I think, where these different sort of exercise routine where you're doing animal movements, and he's always posting pictures of balancing, not exactly parkour stuff, but sort of, doing difficult exercises, balancing on railings and just doing different kind of things. We talk about the benefits of going for a walk, but go for a walk and do some walking backwards, walking sideways, doing some different things. It's good for you in so many ways.
Yeah, like you said, it activates different parts of your brain. If instead of just walking, if I stand up on a railing for a few seconds, I have to pay more attention to my balance now that I wasn't having to do. And so that novel experience, again, is what's really significant. So my hope is that everyone can take from this some ideas of some things to start working on now, rather than waiting until decline sets in, and really help keep your brain healthy and vibrant long-term, rather than just waiting for that natural aging to take it away.
Definitely. Some great ideas there, just some really easy and free things to do as part of your normal routine, switching up a bit. I like it.
Very good. So there we did it. We talked about neurobics in a little more detail. I hope that that's helpful for people.
We did. Perfect. Well, I hope you have a very wonderful week, switching things up, doing things with your left hand if you're right-handed, and right-handed if you're left-handed, and walking backwards and balancing on railings, and please don't injure yourself.
All right. Take good care, everybody.